My boss kept stealing my work for 3 years, so I planted something in my final report that would detonate at exactly the right moment. It started my first week at Meridian Analytics. I'd stayed until midnight perfecting a client presentation on market trends, 15 slides of pure genius, charts that told a story, data that sang. I was so proud walking into the conference room the next morning. Then I watched Beverly present my work to the board. Every slide, every insight, every carefully crafted recommendation. She stood there in her $2,000 suit, clicking through my presentation like she'd birthed each graph herself. When the CEO praised her innovative approach, she actually blushed and said, "Thank you, I worked all weekend on this." I sat frozen in the back row, watching my career-defining work get attributed to someone else. After the meeting, I cornered her in the hallway. "Beverly, that was my presentation." She smiled that cold smile she'd perfected in law school. "Actually, Delilah, you work for me. Everything you create belongs to this department. Maybe you misunderstood your role here." I didn't misunderstand anything. I understood perfectly. For the next 3 years, it became our twisted routine. I'd pour my soul into research, staying late analyzing market data, interviewing industry experts, crafting reports that could change entire business strategies. Beverly would swoop in, slap her name on everything, and present it as her own genius. She got promoted twice on my work, salary increases that should have been mine, recognition in industry magazines for insights I'd discovered, speaking engagements where she quoted my research word for word. Meanwhile, I was still sitting in the same cubicle, making the same salary, watching her climb the corporate ladder wearing boots made from my stolen ideas. The second major theft happened 6 months into my employment. I'd spent 3 weeks developing a revolutionary algorithm that could predict market volatility with 94% accuracy. I called it the Rodriguez prediction model, after months of testing and refinement. I'd planned to present it at the quarterly board meeting myself. Instead, Beverly waltzed into that meeting and unveiled the Hutchins market forecasting system. She stood there explaining my algorithm to a room full of executives, describing the mathematical principles I'd discovered, the testing methodology I'd developed, the applications I'd envisioned. She even had the audacity to explain how she'd overcome the challenges of coding the system, coding I'd done entirely myself, working 16-hour days to perfect every calculation. The board was mesmerized. They called it groundbreaking innovation and approved a $2 million budget to implement the system company-wide. Beverly got a $50,000 bonus and her own research team. I got a coffee mug that said, "Team Player." But the real knife twist came when Beverly started giving interviews about her innovation. Harvard Business Review featured her on their cover. MIT invited her to speak at their annual conference. The Wall Street Journal published a profile calling her the analytical mind reshaping modern finance. In every interview, she described the exact process I'd used to develop the algorithm, the late nights testing variables, the breakthrough moment when the pattern finally clicked, the satisfaction of seeing 94% accuracy in real-world testing. She was literally describing my memories, my experience, my intellectual journey, and claiming it as her own. The most sickening part was watching her on Bloomberg TV, confidently explaining mathematical concepts she barely understood. When the host asked about the theoretical foundation of her model, Beverly fumbled through an answer that revealed she had no idea how the algorithm actually worked. "It's all about finding patterns in chaos," she said vaguely, using almost the exact words I'd written in my original presentation note. That night, I started keeping detailed records, screenshots of my original files, emails showing when I'd submitted my work, video recordings of Beverly presenting my ideas word for word. I created an encrypted folder on my personal laptop and began documenting everything. The third major theft nearly broke me. I'd spent 8 months developing a comprehensive analysis of emerging markets in Southeast Asia. It involved learning 3 new languages to conduct primary source interviews, traveling to Bangkok and Manila on my own dime during vacation time, and building relationships with local business leaders who'd never spoken to American analysts before. The research was groundbreaking. I'd identified investment opportunities worth billions, uncovered market trends that no Western firm had documented, and developed cultural sensitivity protocols that could revolutionize how American companies approached Asian markets. I'd planned to present this research at the International Finance Summit in London, the most prestigious conference in our industry. It would have launched my career into the stratosphere. Instead, Beverly submitted her research and was selected as the keynote speaker. I watched from my apartment as she stood on that London stage, presenting my work to 3,000 of the world's most influential financial minds. She described interviews I'd conducted, quoted sources I'd cultivated, shared insights I'd developed through months of cultural immersion. The standing ovation lasted 7 minutes. Beverly became an overnight sensation, the Western analyst who cracked the Asian code. Publishing houses offered her book deals. Universities invited her to teach courses. Investment firms started headhunting her with packages worth hundreds of thousands, all built on work that was entirely mine. But Beverly had gotten sloppy. In her excitement about her newfound fame, she'd started making mistakes. During a podcast interview, she mispronounced the name of a Bangkok business leader she'd supposedly interviewed extensively. When asked about specific cultural protocols, she gave answers that would have been insulting to the very people she claimed to understand. I started reaching out to my actual sources in Southeast Asia. The business leaders I'd interviewed were confused when they saw Beverly's presentations online. "This woman claims she interviewed me," said Aranyas Rasawat, CEO of Thailand's largest investment firm. "But I have never spoken to her. I only spoke with you, Delilah." Why is she using our conversation? That's when I realized Beverly wasn't just stealing my work. She was committing fraud on an international scale. I began collecting testimony from my sources, video statements from the people I'd actually interviewed, documentation proving Beverly had never traveled to Asia, immigration records showing she'd been in New York during the exact dates she claimed to be conducting field research. The evidence was damning, but I needed the perfect moment to deploy it. That moment came when Meridian announced Beverly's promotion to executive vice president. The company threw a celebration dinner, inviting clients, board members, and industry leaders to honor their visionary analyst. Beverly gave a speech that night, describing her journey from junior analyst to executive leader. She talked about the challenges of developing innovative research, the satisfaction of breakthrough discoveries, the importance of building international relationships. Every word was describing my actual journey, not hers. As she spoke, I quietly distributed a folder to every guest at the dinner. Inside were side-by-side comparisons of my original work and Beverly's presentations, timestamps proving the chronology of theft, testimony from my international sources confirming they'd never met Beverly. The room grew quiet as people realized what they were reading. Beverly continued her speech, oblivious to the growing tension. She was describing her proudest moment, developing the Southeast Asia analysis, when a voice called out from the audience. "Excuse me, Ms. Hutchins?" It was Jonathan Chen, CEO of Pacific Investment Group and one of Meridian's biggest clients. "I'm looking at some interesting documentation here. It suggests that the Southeast Asia research you've built your reputation on was actually conducted by Delilah Rodriguez. Could you explain that?" Beverly's face went white. She stammered something about team collaboration and shared credit. Chen stood up, holding the folder I'd distributed. "According to this evidence, you've never even traveled to Asia. Yet you claim to have conducted extensive field research there. That's not collaboration. That's fraud." One by one, other guests began speaking up. Questions about the timeline discrepancies, the impossibility of Beverly conducting interviews she'd never actually had, the mathematical errors in her explanations of my algorithm. Beverly tried to deflect, claiming the documentation was fabricated and that I was a disgruntled employee spreading lies. That's when Aranya Srisawat appeared on the room's main screen. I'd arranged for her to join by video call from Bangkok. It was 6 a.m. her time, but she'd agreed to set the record straight. "Good evening," Aranya said in her crisp English. "I understand there's confusion about who conducted research in Thailand. I want to clarify that I have never spoken with Beverly Hutchins. She has never contacted me, never interviewed me, never met me. All of my conversations were with Delilah Rodriguez, who spent considerable time understanding our business culture and building genuine relationships with Thai leaders." The room erupted. Board members were pulling out their phones. Clients were demanding explanations. Beverly stood frozen at the podium, her career crumbling in real time. But I still wasn't done. The breaking point came last month when she presented my 18-month analysis on cryptocurrency trends to Fortune 500 executives. That report represented hundreds of hours of work, dozens of interviews, and breakthrough insights that would reshape investment strategies for the next decade. She got a standing ovation, a feature article in Forbes, and a job offer from Goldman Sachs worth $400,000 a year. All for work that was entirely mine. This final theft was different because it involved my most personal research. I developed the cryptocurrency analysis after my brother Luis lost his life savings in a crypto scam. He'd invested everything in a fraudulent coin, convinced by promises of massive return. When the scam collapsed, Luis lost his house, his kids' college funds, everything. He called me crying, asking how he could have been so stupid. I spent weeks helping him navigate bankruptcy, watching a brilliant man destroyed by financial predators. That experience drove me to develop better tools for cryptocurrency analysis. Tools that could identify scams, predict market manipulation, protect ordinary investors from the kind of fraud that had devastated my brother. The research was deeply personal, but it was also revolutionary. I'd identified patterns that no one else had documented, developed predictive models that could save investors millions, created educational frameworks that could democratize cryptocurrency literacy. Beverly had no idea about the personal motivation behind the research. She presented it as innovative fintech analysis, without understanding that every recommendation was written to prevent other families from suffering like Luis had. That night, I sat in my studio apartment eating microwaved pasta, watching Beverly give interviews about her groundbreaking research. She looked radiant under the studio lights, discussing methodologies she'd never used and insights she'd never had. Something inside me finally snapped. I'd been documenting everything for 3 years. Every stolen report, every plagiarized presentation, every moment she'd claimed credit for my work. But documentation wasn't enough. I needed something more elegant, more devastating. So I started crafting my masterpiece. Beverly's final presentation to the executive board was scheduled for today, the one that would secure her Goldman Sachs position and launch her into the stratosphere of corporate success. The presentation I'd been working on for 6 months. A comprehensive analysis that would revolutionize how the company approached international markets. This time, I'd spent months creating something special. On the surface, it appeared to be my standard high-quality research, comprehensive market analysis, innovative strategic recommendations, groundbreaking insights that would generate millions in revenue. But embedded throughout the presentation were landmines only I knew about. Slide 12 contained a mathematical error so subtle that only someone who understood the underlying calculations would notice. But anyone who tried to explain the methodology would expose themselves as a fraud. Slide 23 included a recommendation that sounded brilliant but would actually violate 3 different SEC regulations if implemented. Slide 31 referenced a groundbreaking study that didn't exist, complete with fake citations that any serious analyst would verify before presenting. And Slide 47. Slide 47 was my masterpiece. Of course, she had no idea what was actually in those files, because this time, I hadn't just documented her theft, I'd weaponized it. Hidden in Slide 47 of what appeared to be a standard market analysis was something special. something that would activate at exactly 10:47 a.m., right in the middle of her presentation to the board of directors, the CEO, and the Goldman Sachs representatives who'd flown in specifically to hear Beverly's groundbreaking work. The presentation was in Conference Room A, the glass-walled executive boardroom that overlooked the main office floor. I positioned myself at my cubicle with a perfect view of the proceedings. At 10:30, Beverly strutted into the boardroom wearing her lucky red suit, the same one she'd worn when presenting my Southeast Asia research. She looked confident, radiant, ready to seal her Goldman Sachs deal with another stolen masterpiece. The room filled with the company's most powerful people: CEO Richardson, the entire board of directors, 3 Goldman Sachs executives in identical navy suits. Even some clients had been invited to witness Beverly's final triumph at Meridian. I glanced at my watch. 10:46 a.m. Any second now. At exactly 10:47 a.m., the conference room's projection screen exploded with color. Not the subtle blues and grays of corporate presentations, but hot pink and neon green. Music started blaring. Not elevator music, but the Macarena at full volume. Beverly's face went white as she frantically clicked her presentation remote. Nothing happened. The screen now displayed a massive photo of Beverly's face with the words, "Credit Thief," flashing in rainbow letters. But that was just the opening act. The real show began when the automated slideshow I'd programmed started cycling through 3 years of evidence. Side-by-side comparisons of my original work next to Beverly's stolen presentations. Screenshots of my computer timestamps proving when I'd created each report. Email threads where I'd sent her my research only to watch her present it days later as her own. The board members looked confused, then horrified as they realized what they were witnessing. The Goldman Sachs executives pulled out their phones, clearly documenting this catastrophe. But I wasn't done. The slideshow continued with audio recordings I'd made, conversations where Beverly explicitly took credit for my work, meetings where she dismissed my contributions while claiming my insights as her own brilliant deductions. Her voice filled the room. "Delilah? Oh, she's just an analyst. I develop all the strategic thinking myself." Then came another recording from last month. The cryptocurrency research was completely my concept. Delilah just helped with some data entry. And another. These international sources? I cultivated these relationships over years of careful networking. Delilah wouldn't know how to approach high-level executives. Each quote was time-stamped and cross-referenced with evidence proving the opposite. The presentation included video testimony from my Southeast Asia sources, confirming they'd never met Beverly. Screenshots of Beverly's social media showing her in New York during dates she claimed to be conducting field research in Bangkok. Then came the pièce de résistance, a comprehensive timeline showing how Beverly's career achievements perfectly matched my stolen work. Every promotion, every raise, every accolade could be traced directly to something I'd created. The slideshow revealed Beverly's pattern of theft in devastating detail. Year 1, stole my market trend presentation, Beverly's first promotion. Year 1, stole my volatility algorithm, Beverly's $50,000 bonus. Year 2, stole my Southeast Asia research, Beverly's keynote speech. Year 2, stole my cultural sensitivity protocols, Beverly's consulting offers. Year 3, stole my cryptocurrency analysis, Beverly's Goldman Sachs offer. Each theft was documented with irrefutable evidence. Original files with my computer's metadata. Email chains showing when I'd submitted work. Video of Beverly presenting concepts she'd never seen before I created them. The final slide was a simple message. Delilah Rodriguez has been the real analytical genius behind every major Meridian success story. Beverly Hutchins is a fraud who has built her entire career on stolen work. This presentation, like all others, was researched and created by Delilah Rodriguez. Beverly had no idea what was in these files because she never does the actual work. The room fell dead silent. Beverly stood frozen at the podium, her mouth opening and closing like a suffocating fish. The Goldman Sachs representatives were already packing their briefcases. CEO Richardson stood up slowly. His face was the color of a ripe tomato. "Beverly, my office. Now." As the room emptied, I calmly walked to the front and ejected my USB drive from the presentation computer. Beverly finally found her voice. You can't, this is sabotage," I finished. "Fraud? Theft? Which crime are you thinking of, Beverly? Because I've got 3 years of evidence documenting yours." Her hands were shaking. "You'll never work in this industry again. I'll make sure of it." I smiled the same cold smile she'd perfected years ago. "Actually, Beverly, I think you're confused about who has the power here." Through the glass walls, I could see the entire office floor buzzing with activity. Word was spreading fast. People were pulling up the presentation files I'd distributed via the company's internal network. Beverly's assistant was frantically trying to delete social media posts that referenced her innovative research. 20 minutes later, Beverly was escorted out by security, her personal items in a cardboard box. I watched from my cubicle as she stumbled toward the elevator, her designer heels clicking frantically against the marble floor. Her assistant, Monica, approached my desk with tears in her eyes. "Delilah, I'm so sorry. I had no idea Beverly was stealing your work. All those times she asked me to retrieve your files from the shared drive, I thought she was just reviewing your progress." I patted Monica's shoulder. "It's not your fault. Beverly was very good at manipulation." Monica nodded. "For what it's worth, everyone on this floor knew your work was too sophisticated to be Beverly's. We didn't know how to prove it." That afternoon, Richardson called me into his office. I expected termination, legal threats, corporate warfare. Instead, he offered me Beverly's job. "In light of recent revelations, the board has voted to promote you to Senior Director of Market Analysis, with Beverly's salary, of course, and a signing bonus to compensate for the oversight in recognition over the past 3 years." The signing bonus was $150,000, more than Beverly had made in stolen credit over the entirety of her fraudulent career. Richardson leaned back in his leather chair. Delilah, I have to ask, how long have you been planning this? I considered lying, but decided honesty served me better. 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. Since the first time she stole my work. He whistled low. That's impressive and terrifying. Remind me never to cross you. Just don't steal my work, and we'll be fine. The next few days were surreal. Legal called to discuss the Beverly situation. Apparently, her theft constituted both breach of contract and intellectual property fraud. HR wanted to review my documentation to prevent future incidents. The board requested a formal presentation on how to identify and prevent credit theft. But the best part came 3 weeks later when I received a LinkedIn message from someone at Goldman Sachs. Ms. Rodriguez, we were deeply impressed by your work ethic and strategic brilliance. After reviewing your actual portfolio, not the plagiarized versions we were previously shown, we'd like to discuss a position with our firm. When would you be available for a conversation? The message was from Elena Vasquez, the same Goldman Sachs executive who'd been in the room during Beverly's meltdown. I called her that afternoon. Ms. Rodriguez, Elena said, I've been in this business for 20 years, and I've never seen anything quite like what happened in that conference room. Your presentation was devastating, but more importantly, it demonstrated exactly the kind of strategic thinking we value at Goldman Sachs. She paused. We've spent the last 3 weeks reviewing your actual work, your real portfolio, not Beverly's stolen presentations. Your Southeast Asia research is groundbreaking. Your cryptocurrency analysis could revolutionize how we approach digital assets. Your volatility algorithm is more sophisticated than anything our current team has developed. The position they offered was the same one they'd rescinded from Beverly. $400,000 annually, plus bonuses based on the quality of my actual analytical work. But there was more. We're also prepared to offer you something Beverly never would have received. Elena continued, full intellectual property rights to your research, a dedicated team of junior analysts, and equity in any investment funds based on your strategies. I accepted immediately. Beverly, meanwhile, had been blacklisted from every major firm in the city. Word traveled fast in our industry, especially when it involved such spectacular fraud. The video of her presentation meltdown had gone viral on LinkedIn, viewed by over 2 million professionals in our field. Industry publications started investigating her background, uncovering a pattern of academic dishonesty dating back to business school. Harvard revoked the speaking invitation they'd extended based on my Southeast Asia research. MIT removed her from their advisory board. She'd tried to reinvent herself as a freelance consultant, but potential clients would Google her name and find endless articles about the Meridian Analytics scandal. The Forbes piece that had originally celebrated her stolen insights was retracted, replaced with an investigation into corporate credit theft. 2 months after my Goldman Sachs promotion, I received an unexpected visitor at my new Manhattan office. Beverly stood in my reception area, looking like a shadow of her former self. Gone were the designer suits and perfect makeup. She wore a wrinkled blazer and scuffed shoes, her hair showing gray roots she could no longer afford to color. Delilah, she said quietly, can we talk? I almost said no. But curiosity won. We sat in my office, the same size as the one she'd occupied at Meridian, with the same view of Central Park she'd love to brag about. I know you have no reason to help me, Beverly began, but I wanted to apologize and to ask for your mercy. She explained that she'd been struggling to find work anywhere in the financial sector. The fraud allegations had destroyed her professional reputation. She'd burned through her savings trying to maintain her lifestyle while unemployed. I'm facing bankruptcy, she admitted. I might lose my apartment. I've applied for entry-level positions at banks, insurance companies, even retail financial services. Nobody will hire me. She looked around my office, at the awards on my wall, the flowers clients had sent, the respect I'd finally earned. I see you got everything you deserved, she said bitterly. Everything I thought I deserved. I leaned back in my chair. Beverly, you stole 3 years of my career. 3 years of recognition, advancement, and financial growth. You built your entire professional identity on work I created. She nodded, tears starting to flow. I know it was wrong, but I was desperate. I was struggling with the technical aspects of analysis. The math was so hard for me. When I saw your first presentation, it was like finding gold. So instead of asking for help or finding a different career path, you decided to steal from me for 3 years. I thought if I could just establish myself, prove I belonged in this industry, then I could develop my own skills. I never meant for it to go on so long. I studied her face. She looked genuinely remorseful, but I'd seen Beverly perform before. What exactly are you asking me for? A recommendation, she said quickly. Something that acknowledges my administrative skills, my ability to manage teams, anything that might help me find work outside the financial sector. I considered her request. Beverly had been a competent manager, if nothing else. She'd run meetings efficiently, handled client relationships professionally, maintained departmental budgets responsibly, but she'd also committed fraud that had damaged my career for years. I'll make you a deal, I said finally. I'll write you a recommendation letter that focuses on your managerial and administrative capabilities. Nothing about analytical skills or strategic thinking, but honest praise for the work you actually did. Relief flooded her face. Thank you so much. But, I continued, there's a condition. You're going to write a public apology. A detailed confession acknowledging exactly what you stole from me, when you stole it, and how it impacted my career. You're going to post it on LinkedIn, send it to every industry publication, and make sure everyone who heard about your innovations knows the truth. Beverly's face went pale. Delilah, that would destroy any chance I have of rebuilding my reputation. Your reputation was built on stolen work. This is about rebuilding my reputation by giving me the credit I always deserved. She sat silently for a long moment, weighing her options. If I do this, if I confess publicly, will you really help me find work? I'll write an honest recommendation focusing on your actual skills. What you do with that is up to you. Beverly nodded slowly. Okay, I'll write the confession. 3 days later, her LinkedIn post went live. It was everything I'd hoped for. A detailed, specific acknowledgement of every piece of work she'd stolen from me. She named each presentation, each report, each insight she'd claimed as her own. The post generated thousands of comments. Industry leaders praising my actual work. Former Meridian colleagues confirming Beverly's confession. New connections reaching out to discuss collaboration opportunities. As promised, I wrote Beverly a recommendation letter that honestly described her administrative and managerial capabilities. I sent it to her without any personal commentary. Last week, I saw her working at a Starbucks near my Goldman Sachs office. She was wearing a green apron instead of designer suits, her hands shaking as she struggled with the espresso machine. When she saw me, her face went ashen. I ordered my usual, a medium coffee, black, and left a $5 tip. As I walked away, I heard her whisper to her coworker, "That woman destroyed my entire life." Her coworker, a college kid who clearly didn't know the story, shrugged. "What did you do to her?" Beverly's voice was barely audible. "I stole her work, for 3 years." I paused at the door and turned back. "No, Beverly. You stole 3 years of my life. I just took back what was always mine." But the story didn't end there. 6 months later, my brother Luis called with incredible news. The cryptocurrency educational framework I'd developed, the one Beverly had stolen for her Goldman Sachs presentation, had been implemented by the SEC as part of their investor protection initiative. "Delilah," Luis said, his voice choked with emotion, "they're using your research to create mandatory education programs for cryptocurrency investors. The exact tools you designed after my scam. They're going to protect millions of families from going through what we did." The SEC had credited me by name, describing the framework as revolutionary investor protection methodology, developed by Goldman Sachs senior analyst Delilah Rodriguez. The irony was perfect. Beverly had stolen research born from my family's pain, but she never understood its true purpose. When it reached the SEC through proper channels, it was being used exactly as I'd intended, to protect vulnerable investors from the kind of fraud that had devastated Luis. 3 months after that, Harvard Business School called. They wanted me to teach a course on ethical research methodology and intellectual property protection in finance. "We've been following your work," the dean explained. "Your experience with the Meridian situation, combined with your research innovations, makes you uniquely qualified to train the next generation of analysts." I accepted the position as an adjunct professor. My first lecture was titled, "The True Cost of Academic Fraud." Sometimes people ask me if I feel guilty about what I did to Beverly, if I think my revenge was too harsh. I tell them about the nights I cried myself to sleep, watching someone else get credit for my brilliance. About the career opportunities I missed because my work was attributed to someone else. About the financial struggles I endured while Beverly got raises from my stolen insights. Then I tell them about Emma, my little sister, who's now in her 2nd year at MIT studying data analytics, because I could finally afford to help with her tuition. About the house I bought my parents after years of saving money I should have earned long ago. About the scholarship fund I started for young women pursuing careers in financial analysis. The Delilah Rodriguez Scholarship for Ethical Research now provides full tuition for 10 students annually. Each recipient commits to mentoring younger women and upholding the highest standards of intellectual honesty. Beverly taught me something valuable about corporate America. Documentation isn't just important for research, it's essential for justice. And sometimes justice requires a little creative presentation skills. Every few months, I get messages from young professionals who've discovered their work being stolen by supervisors. I always give them the same advice. Document everything, be patient, and remember that the most devastating weapons are often hidden in plain sight. I've started a private consulting practice helping employees document workplace fraud. Last year, we exposed 12 cases of credit theft across 7 different companies. Each victim received appropriate compensation and recognition for their actual work. After all, the best revenge isn't just getting even. It's getting everything that should have been yours in the first place. Beverly learned that lesson the hard way. And I learned that sometimes the most satisfying presentations are the ones nobody expects. The last time I saw Beverly, she was working at a small accounting firm in Queens, doing basic bookkeeping for local businesses. Her LinkedIn profile listed her as administrative assistant, with no mention of her previous analytical career. She'd found honest work that matched her actual skills. Sometimes I wonder if she ever thinks about the 3 years she spent living a lie, building a career on stolen brilliance. If she regrets the fraud that destroyed her professional life, or if she just regrets getting caught. But mostly, I don't think about Beverly at all anymore. I'm too busy doing what I always did best, creating innovative research that changes how the world understands financial markets. The only difference now is that my name is on every presentation, and that makes all the difference in the world.